Hello everyone, my name is Jake Jones, and it is my honor to present to you FILEX, FILECOIN, and how you can file your wealth together with us today in this amazing new platform. Before I begin, I would like to share with you the idea that money is not equivalent to wealth, because anyone who has grown wealthy will tell you that it is essential to have knowledge, assets, and a network in order to achieve a constant and sustainable lifestyle and financial income over a long period of time. So with that being said, this presentation does not constitute any investment advice, and the content of this document is not prepared for the specific investment objectives, financial situation, and individual needs of any individual investor. Investors should not invest solely based on the content of this presentation. The topics I will be covering today are Web 3.0, IPFS, and FILECOIN, as well as an introduction to FILEX and FILEX cloud mining. So welcome to the era of Web 3.0, and let's go over exactly what that term means. We'll start by remembering an era that many of us actually lived through back in the mid-90s, which is Web 1.0. Back then, Web 1.0, from 1996 to approximately 2004, it was a hypertext web. It was very one-directional. Remember those days we had to actually go through a dial-up system like LAN cables, and we had to key in website addresses, and we were doing things like playing games and communicating with other users that had access to computers, and we're still, learning how to use them to connect to the internet. At that time, the number of people online was only in the millions. And then Web 2.0 came along. It was called the social web. It was a read and write web. Internet traffic flow had become more of a bidirectional one. Social media was becoming more and more easy and accessible with better connection speeds. Apps were designed so that people could have interactions with each other more frequently instead of only reading something from the internet. An iconic change that happened at this time was Facebook, which was a real game changer because it drove people to share their lifestyle and interact with each other, which grew the number of users into the billions. The infrastructure for the web had exploded in many countries, and the cost of accessing it had dropped drastically. So that is the basics of what we called the social web or Web 2.0. And now we come to today and the era of Web 3.0, which started in roughly 2016. This is known as the semantic web. It's a web that can be executed. So what do we mean by executed? What we mean is that you can put a small amount of information into the web, and this input triggers a script to run autonomously. Basically, your input causes a difference that causes a chain of commands and a chain of responses that can continue to run for days and even months afterward. This helped explode the number of connections into the trillions with the use of all these decentralized apps, or what we call dApps. As you can see here, we have apps becoming more popular in Web 2.0, and now in 3.0, we have the explosion of dApps being created. These dApps are described as having self-understanding and running autonomously without control of a human. Some even go as far as to call this AI. If you look in the app column on the right here, you might recognize some of these apps, such as the Chrome browser app, which is now losing users who are moving over to the Brave browser dApp. We also have apps like Dropbox and Google Drive. These apps are now being replaced with more secure, decentralized dApps like Storage or IPFS, which we are going to spend some time talking about today. These are just a handful of some of the most popular centralized apps that we have all become familiar with. And then on the right of that, you see the decentralized dApps that are gaining traction in Web 3.0. So this is basically a simple shift in technology and the way the web functions with all the users. The tools we are using are becoming more and more secure and accessible via the implementation of this type of infrastructure. Now, this is an infographic that we grabbed from Deloitte.com, which is one of the most successful firms in the world. They did a fantastic job on this visual aid, as you can see here. This physical layer of our world is where we all live, breathe, eat, sleep. It's what we see, feel, and hear. And then there is a digital layer where all our interactions from the physical layer are stored. which include things like our age, our credentials, our preferences, profiles, friend connections, medical records, credit reports, banking transactions, etc. And then we have the spatial interaction layer. What we are looking at here is the layer in which the information from the physical and digital layers start to interact with each other. It is a layer that 20 or 30 years ago, we just couldn't have imagined would really ever exist because everything we did was based on a storage of ones and zeros and human inputs. But now that we are in Web 3.0, it is the layer that has taken on a life of its own. It's the layer in which AI resides. It is where all of our data is not just stored and inactive. Okay, so on the right-hand side, you can see 3 tiers of the IT infrastructure and how it has evolved over the 3 versions of the web. And so you can see here that the information tier in Web 1.0 was always structured. They called it SQL. From top down, there's always a parent directory and a sub and so on and so forth, and it moves on downward. Compared to Web 2.0, where there is so much unstructured big data or data that is not created from a single parent. In other words, this is a ton of data that lives and was created from no single parent or source, where you might be creating data from one location and then someone else is inputting data from another location that lives there as well. And then that brings us into Web 3.0, where it is pure distributed ledger technology, which is IPFS, and I will cover more about that later. Now, let's compare the computation tier. This is something that is very, very close to all of us right here. During Web 1.0, we had situated servers, dialed up by plugged-in wires, and so on. And then we ended up graduating from that to cloud computing during Web 2.0 via communications such as 3G and 4G, and we started using iCloud and Google Drive and companies like that, and the speeds were exploding. But now as we are entering into 5G and speeds are increasing even faster, distributed computing via AI, etc., is becoming more and more common. Then we have the interaction tier, which of course started with desktop computers, servers, and cords in 1.0, mobile smart devices and touchpads in 2.0, and now in 3.0, we have wearable devices such as smartwatches and virtual reality software integration and devices and so on. So as you can see, this is a very exciting time to be alive, to be experiencing all these beneficial changes. The evolution that we've witnessed in a very short period of time is phenomenal. So can you just try to imagine what the next 20 years is going to be like? The main thing that we know, and many are totally oblivious to, is that we are creating big data on a daily basis. For example, there are 5 billion online searches done every single day. That is over 50 billion gigabytes of data generated worldwide, and this figure is expected to double every 2 years. And according to the IDC's Data Age 2025 report, the global annual data generated will increase from 33 ZB, which it was in 2018, to over 175 ZB, which is equivalent to 491 EB of data every single day. To put this in perspective, 1 ZB is equivalent to 1.1 trillion gigabytes. If all this data was stored on DVD disks, the height of the stack would be 23 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And with an average download speed of 25 megabytes per second, it would take 1.8 billion years for a person to download 175 ZB of data. Most of you have never even heard of anything higher than a gigabyte or a terabyte, but these numbers are all very real and expanding so fast that it is really unfathomable the opportunities that have been created. So this is a very real situation, a real problem, and the question is there a solution? Well, the answer is yes. IPFS and FILECOIN work together in such a way, just like how blockchain and cryptocurrency functioned in Web 2.0. So IPFS and FILECOIN is really the #1 solution in the era of Web 3.0 and big data.
What once was is also now becoming no more. The speed of technology means that with innovation, there's a degradation of data. Our content can get lost because the actual hardware that hosted it was not maintained. But not anymore. That's at least the idea of FILECOIN that incentivizes the average person to support and build in IPFS.
As we all know, it was about 10 or 15 years ago that crypto was considered very risky, but this time has come and gone. And I would say it is the best time to become a part of it because the lack of information is no longer a barrier of taking part, and many of these currencies have a very well-established track record. What we realized in 2021 is that blockchain and cryptocurrency have skyrocketed, with a total crypto market cap exceeding 1,000 billion for the first time in history. Bitcoin reached an all-time high of over $61,000. And then, of course, we saw major companies start investing in the crypto world, Elon Musk himself included, along with the likes of PayPal, Cash App, Visa, and MasterCard, and so on. All these companies are going big into crypto, and this success has made it the safest time to get into cryptocurrency space. So what is IPFS and FILECOIN? IPFS and FILECOIN is the future of Web 3.0, and it is the biggest opportunity in the blockchain on the ecosystem level because it is something that really affects the infrastructure and entire ecosystem in a positive way. This truly is the right time and the right place because, as you can see, information storage is actually the base of the entire system. So IPFS, in short, is a peer-to-peer hypermedia protocol that is designed to make the web faster, safer, and more open. IPFS stands for Interplanetary File System. In a nutshell, IPFS allows you to create a local web. So what does this mean? IPFS uses the network capabilities of existing devices, such as Wi-Fi, to create interconnected networks. It has evolved from HTTP, and here are some key points on why it is safer. So first of all, what we see on HTTP, that we have a centralized server that relies on the main network. We get things like 404, which is a loss or inaccessibility. We have downtime. We have hackers. We have DDoS, and then we go into a black hole. We get limits in data storage, and transmission speed is limited. If files get damaged, historically, we cannot recover them. All of these issues are because it is on a centralized server, but on IPFS, it is decentralized. So it doesn't run on any main network. It is distributed, so even if one server crashes, it is still going to run and it will still be there. In simple terms, we can use a string of Christmas lights as an analogy for HTTP. If one bulb goes out, then the entire string of lights goes out. But this doesn't happen with IPFS because it is nonlinear. This provides you with a highly secure distributed storage because you get to upload and encrypt it all. Also because IPFS is open sourced with higher resource utilization. It means it is much more low cost and convenient compared to large server storage houses like Amazon Cloud, iCloud, Google Drive, and so on. Now, of course, we do now have HTTPS, but it is still susceptible to hacking and issues that IPFS solves. So there you have it. We have better reliability, higher security, and better privacy because it is encrypted. This is why leading companies around the world have started investing in IPFS. Now, let's talk about who the founder of IPFS is and who's behind this incredible project. This is Juan Bennett. He's the founder and CEO of Protocol Labs. He was born in Mexico in 1988, and in 2006, he was admitted to Stanford University. He studied computer science and engaged in the research and development of distributed storage network technology. Then in 2014, he formally conceived and initiated the IPFS project. With the goal of returning the internet back to a decentralized world, he was then joined by his team. I recommend you take the time to pause this video and read about these brilliant and highly motivated people. We have Molly and David, Raul. We also have Matt and Alan and Michelle. Please take the time to check these people out and look them up online.
The first phase of our work, decentralizing the web, was to build IPFS. The next phase, improving on this foundation, is a new protocol, FILECOIN. With the rise of protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum, we've seen massive decentralized networks form where anyone can dedicate their computer to run the network and earn crypto tokens for doing so. Mining for tokens is so profitable that these networks have spread globally and created the world's most powerful computing systems. We realized that we could use the same kind of incentive structures of Bitcoin to create a decentralized storage network. There is a massive amount of unused latent storage out there. The vision for FILECOIN is to create a decentralized storage market, a network kind of like Airbnb, where all that unused storage can be sold on the market. So with this vast amount of supply joining the network that is not currently connected, we can optimize our resources and drop the cost of storage.
But apart from having a great team, they are very well funded and supported by the top people in the world. This is just a handful of some of the key players amongst at least 50 to 100 others in the world, but we just want to mention these briefly here. And also, it is one of the only blockchain projects that achieved such a large range of real-life applications in such a very short period of time. So how does IPFS actually work? It's pretty simple. The user who wants to store the data pays the miners. The safety of the data is the most important. Then once the user wants the file back, the user pays the miner to retrieve their file back again.
FILECOIN incentivizes miners to create nodes to store files. Storage miners, anyone really, are rewarded for the storage they provide the network. And FILECOIN will be used as the payment token by people using the storage system. It's a new economy that lets regular folks like you and me participate peer-to-peer.
Now, this is going a bit deeper into how IPFS works. As you can see here, you actually put the file into IPFS, and then IPFS network replies with a file hash and says, hey, I recognize the file. And then the smart contract activates to share the public key of the data file to the owner of the file. And at that same time, the smart contract splits the file up into multiple encrypted shares and distributed to storage on the blockchain. How many shares depends on the size of the file, and every location of a share is randomly chosen and encrypted. Now, only the owner can ever retrieve the data file because he is the only one who is holding the key. The miner who holds a share of that data file will never be able to decrypt and see a picture of what is in the file. It's like storing a picture that has been chopped up into a million pieces and scattered. Even if decryption were possible, the miner could never see the picture because he only has that tiny little encrypted part. So you can see how this is so much safer than storing on the cloud with one single company like Google Drive. So here's what happens when the owner goes to retrieve his data file. The smart contract acknowledges the owner's key and requests his data file from IPFS. Then all the nodes that include a portion of the data reply back that they have a part of the file, and then use a direct peer-to-peer connection to send the file back to the owner, where it is reassembled during download. For those of you who have downloaded a torrent or used any torrent software, you understand that this operates in a very similar way. Now let's talk a little bit more about the role of FILECOIN in this ecosystem and how exactly it is incentivized to be used on IPFS. For starters, it uses a very new technology called POST. This is an acronym for Proof of Spacetime, which is a consensus mechanism. So essentially, you are proving how much storage space you are providing to the network and for how much time. It's basically a reward for the shared economy of the Web 3.0 decentralized distribution and storage. Only storage and broadband is required, and unlike Bitcoin, no high electric bills and noise pollution are required. Plus, it provides the very best and fair incentive layer for market and miners. And it truly is the only revolutionary technology breakthrough since Ethereum. And as I've mentioned before, it is the only project that has real-time value among the 43,000 projects based on cryptography and blockchain technology. So now let's look at the tokenomics of FILECOIN and why do we trust it. First of all, and this is very, very important, it has a hard cap of 2 billion FILECOIN in circulation, compared to Ethereum, which does not have a hard cap. So the 2 billion FILECOIN is proportioned out as follows. 15% conservatively and deservedly goes to Protocol Labs, 10% goes to investors, and 5% to the foundation. These will all be released over time. Since the start of the mining from the 15th of October 2020, and then by the 15th of October 2021, most of the early stage tokens will have been released, and the other 70% of the tokens can only be minted through mining. This is why FILEX is the goose that laid the golden egg in 2021. And we also want to mention here a proof of replication and proof of spacetime. In other words, are you currently set up to always have a redundant backup copy of your data files somewhere on a cloud storage, safely backed up in multiple locations all at once, immediately safe, backed up and encrypted in more than one location? Well, I think most people would say they do not. And that is the problem IPFS solves. So here's a nice little historical record on IPFS and FILECOIN. In 2017, they went through SEC compliance to launch the first ever SEC ICO and to achieve the highest record at the time of $257 million funded for the whole project. And also this year, after the launch, trust fund Grayscale launched an individual product called the Grayscale FILECOIN Trust. You can see the link at the bottom, so go check that out. You can see it's increased already since the inception date. And best of all, it is listed in all major exchanges because, as you may or may not know, everyone is always concerned about being able to sell or convert their tokens quickly. A person might think, boy, Jake, you did a great presentation and FILECOIN sounds exciting, but when it comes down to it, can I sell it on the exchanges? And the answer is yes, you can. It's listed in over 130 exchanges and all the major exchanges that you see in the world. So why would you trust your very important data to IPFS and FILECOIN? This is a very important question, and the answer is because you are paying for it. You realize that basically all the best products in the world are the ones that we pay for. I know you've heard the saying, you get what you pay for. And also because the miner has to pledge the storage space like a deposit before he can even start to store the data. So his investment and his effort into setting up the storage is already worth a certain value, and it is in this value that you are safe to feel confident to put your data into his storage. FILECOIN is built through reputation, not marketing. Storage providers prove their reliability through their track record published on the blockchain, not through marketing claims published by themselves. A miner's reputation will show how reliable they are on the blockchain, how stable their nodes are, what are their hash rates they can produce, and are they always consistent. Open source is very important. It offers competitive pricing. I think this is one of the key things to attracting people to use FILECOIN for their data storage. FILECOIN doesn't have the huge overhead that companies like Google Drive and iCloud have, and the pricing is determined by supply and demand instead of the cost of huge, powerful data centers that require tons of daily labor and expenses that go into their corporate pricing. With a decentralized system like FILECOIN, all the money is actually used to incentivize the network, or what we call the miners. Self-healing is another aspect. The FILECOIN network continually verifies that the files are stored correctly. This is something that is very important because if your node is not performing well, you face the penalty to lose everything if you do not fix your node or your storage. Active community is another important facet of FILECOIN because this level of consensus and commitment has never been seen before in the world, with such a huge community of active contributors that are here to make sure IPFS does not fail. And finally, single protocol. This means that applications implementing FILECOIN can store their data on any miner using the same protocol. So this means there is no difference from miner A or miner B or miner C. The only difference is their reputation and their space and the price that they request.
The way the internet has evolved, there are single points of failure everywhere. We saw this play out in Egypt, where suddenly one morning, people woke up to the internet just completely shut down. They couldn't reach each other, they couldn't talk to each other. We believe it's incredibly important to improve the properties of the internet with the ideas of decentralization and peer-to-peer networks. So that's what we're working on. We built IPFS, a protocol to remove those central points of failure, to improve the resilience of the internet and the web, and to give information a stronger sense of permanence.
IPFS is a really amazing community of developers that are interested in building decentralized technologies.
IPFS is a large-scale open-source endeavor with people that contribute from all over the world. We are a community of people who really care about the future of the web and who want to address the problems.